listening to Cowboy Logic with Jason Forby, a message of grace and hope.
Is everybody good? I always think of that song, and that's one of my favorite songs, but I always think about that one line says, "My whole life you've been faithful." You know, it's like, my whole life, He's been faithful. Doesn't mean I was. I mean, very seldom have I been, probably, but it didn't affect Him any. Like, He remained faithful, and I was thinking about that, even when I didn't even want anything to do with Him, He was still, His goodness and mercy running after me. I don't know, I just sitting over there thinking, why in the world would we run from that? And so then I saw an angel, somebody running from the goodness of God. An angel went, boop, boom. Quit running, knucklehead. All right. Everybody's good? Since we talked about power and knowing your covenant, right? We're in a new covenant with God, and the power of knowing the difference of your covenant. You're in covenant with God, and it's a new covenant. It's not the old covenant. We don't mix the two covenants any longer. We're in a new covenant with God. And so, you know, we talked about the power of covenant. David understood, right? When he looked at Goliath and he said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" Well, why is he saying that for, right? Well, circumcision was your way into the covenant at that time, the old covenant that David was under. And so what's he saying to the giant? He's saying, hey, you're not in covenant with God. We're in covenant with God. So therefore, victory is ours. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care how big I am, how big you are. All of that is irrelevant. I'm in covenant with God and you're not. Today, your head rolls. Right? I like that. Well, if David had that in an old covenant, how much more should the sons of God that are not in covenant based on the shadows and the types and the blood of a barnyard animal, but have a new covenant that's not based on man's performance, but based on who God is? I just think it ought to be better than the old covenant. So anyway, power of your covenant, right? So in the new covenant now, one of my favorite things about the new covenant is that we get to participate in communion or in the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper. You know, they were celebrating Passover and all of that. And so since we're on the covenant deal, we don't do it here corporately as maybe much as we could, but partly because what we believe now is you don't have to come corporately to participate. You don't have to come corporately. You don't have to have a preacher. You don't have to have a deacon. That's why we just have these kids and anybody pass it out. You know, there's a lot of religious people that would just about have a stroke. Just you gotta be. That's another deal. You don't have to have a preacher. You don't have to have a deacon. You don't have to have all the right stuff. You don't have to have, it's you and God. And we've missed out on a lot because we haven't understood this. And so we just come to do it every once in a while, hopefully knowing that you learn something about it and how powerful it is, and you can take it home with you. And if you need it every day, you can have it every day. Right? So we're talking about the power of covenant. We might as well enjoy a covenant meal. You know, every time a covenant's struck, they seal the deal with a meal. That's why they have a reception after a wedding. Anytime a covenant is struck, you seal the deal with a meal. And so Jesus is having the Last Supper with the boys, right? And so it's Passover they're celebrating. So let's read 1 Corinthians 11. 1 Corinthians 11. This is where Paul's writing to the Corinthians, and he's dealing with all of their stuff, and they're really missing out on what communion's about. And so he's kind of teaching them here. And so this is what he says, verse 23. "For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, in the night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body. This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" Everybody say remembrance. "In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance,'" everybody say remembrance, "remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death." You're proclaiming something. You proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. "Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner shall be guilty of the body and of the blood of the Lord. But a man must examine himself, and in so doing he is to eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For he who eats and drinks judgment to himself, if he does not judge the body rightly. For this reason, many among you are weak, sick, and a number sleep, which means dying before you're supposed to. For this one reason, right? What we've been talking about for weeks now, how to win. Paul apparently, maybe he'd been stoned too many times, maybe he'd been knocked in the head, maybe he was a little bit confused, but at least according to Paul, and God let it slip into the Bible somehow, he must have been not paying attention either, because here it is, it's in our Bibles. Paul's writing a letter to a church full of believers, a bunch of messed up believers that I might add, the most messed up ones, and he's saying there's one reason why you're not experiencing victory. He said there's one reason why many among you are weak, sick, and dying before you're supposed to. Come on, is it in there? And so my cowboy logic would say, okay, well, if there's one reason that we're weak, sick, and dying before we're supposed to, then if we got the remedy to that reason, then we'd be strong, we'd be healed and healthy, and we'd be living out all a long life. Come on, you guys with me? I mean, it just makes sense, don't it? As some translations say, from not discerning the body, from not understanding what you're actually doing, or it's just been a ritual, or you're not mixing it with faith, or you're not understanding what's exactly happening, or not partaking of it in the correct frame of mind, or what, put it all kinds of ways. For that one reason is why many among you are not healed. So I thought, well, if not discerning the body produces that, then man, I want to discern the body, don't you? I want to know, what is it I need to know? What is it we need to see? What is it we need to understand? Because I want to be healthy. I want to be strong. I want to win the 5K. I don't know. There's usually some high school punk that shows up and... One reason, he says, right? So before I get into the reason, I got to at least say this, because I want everybody to be able to participate. And if you grew up in certain places, not everybody got to participate. They would disqualify you and say that you're not worthy, or if there's sin in your life, then you better pass it on by, or you'll be even worse off than you were before, right? Well, that's not true. That's not the case. They've mistranslated the whole deal. Paul's saying because of the way you're taking it. The way that you're taking it is unworthy, right? King James would say unworthily. Unworthily is an adverb. It's describing the verb, not the noun. Got it? I'm surrounded by school teachers. I didn't actually retain this until later in life. I remember they tried to teach me. An adverb is describing the verb. That's the action. It's not an adjective describing the noun, which would be the taker. It's not saying that the taker is unworthy. The way that we're taking, the taking part is what's not worthy. It's not what's taking advantage of what Jesus actually did for us. You got it? So everybody's qualified to take. Don't pass it on by. You're not being cursed worse if there's sin in your life. Look, it's for unworthy people. Come on. So everybody's got it, right? Nobody has to pass it on by. That's been a lie. So everybody's qualified. Got it? All right. So everybody's good. So I think about remembrance. Jesus said, do this in remembrance. Right? Like, what in the world does that mean? Do this in remembrance. Does that mean like remember a verse or something? Or remember that, okay, Jesus died for me. Oh, that's nice. Okay, I remember that or something. I think it's way more than that. I've been studying for the last couple years probably the power of a thought, the power of how much power there is in the way we think and who we actually are. And so Jesus is saying, do this in remembrance. So it's like, what is remembrance? What is a memory? What is remembering something, right? So a memory is actually a thought of something that happened previously, but you go back and visit that in your mind. Got it? I always use the example, Leighton's not here, she likes my examples, but I use the example of me and Leighton, we got chased by a buffalo, right? Buffalo's after us. I mean, them buffalo are fast, and they're after us and trying to hook us, and we just barely made it under the fence, and just almost it was catastrophe, right? This didn't really happen. Just an example. And so that could have happened whenever, whatever day that was, say 5 years ago. And then all of a sudden, Leighton's around. She says, hey, tell that story about when the buffalo got after us, right? And so then I'll say, all right, you guys want to hear the story about buffalo getting after us? Man, here's the way it went. This is a certain day and all this. And we're telling it. And the next thing you know, we're reliving that thing. We're revisiting. So in our minds, our imagination, we're actually entertaining and going to the place of something that happened previously. Here's what's interesting. What happens is, I'm telling the story about something that happened 5 years ago, but while I'm telling the story, my palms get a little sweaty. I get a little shaky. My heart rate, right? Adrenaline starts to be dumped into your body. So what's happening? They've discovered that your body does not recognize the difference between an actual event or an imagined event. 5 years ago, I got chased by a buffalo. And then today, I'm reliving it by telling you the story. And in my imagination, I'm telling you the story. I'm remembering the thing. I'm visiting there in my mind and recounting the actual events. And what's happening is my mind is now dumping the adrenaline into my body, all the sweat, right? So what happened is my body doesn't actually recognize whether or not it's actually happening or if it's just an imagine. As far as the body's concerned, there's no difference. You got it? As far as the body's concerned, there's no difference between an actual event or you reliving it. This is why it's important for us to understand what peace is. This is why it's important for us because we can go our whole lives thinking about something that happened to us in the past, and our body thinks it's happening to us every single day, and it continues to produce sickness, disease. I could stay all day right there. Everybody got it? Remember. You got it? Okay, we'll come back to that. Now, we want to say, okay, not discerning the body. Not discerning the body. We want to discern the body, right? Understand the body, because that's where healing is. And so we say, what are they doing? They're celebrating Passover. Jesus and the boys, right? Celebrating Passover. And so Passover was when Moses went and told Pharaoh to let my people go. You remember the plagues and all that stuff? They're slaves in Egypt. And so the Passover was the last thing that came along, and God said, okay, Moses, go down there and tell everybody that the death angel's going to pass over Egypt, and it's going to kill all the firstborn. Everything, animals, people, doesn't matter. Every firstborn is going to be killed by the death angel. But here's the deal. Moses, tell them if they'll take a lamb and they'll sacrifice the lamb and put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. You remember? Put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and when the death angel comes by, he'll see the blood on there, and he'll say, there's already been a death here. Pass over that place, and who the firstborn in that house is spared, is saved. Right? That's why they call it Passover. He's going to pass over. But we all heard about that. We've sang the songs about that. We've heard of it when we take communion, right? We celebrate all that. But what we didn't hear about was what they said, now take the body of the lamb and roast it and take it inside and eat it. Eat all of it. Make sure you eat it all, right? Nobody's ever said too much about that. But here's what I've come to know, that because they ate the body of the lamb, the judgment was roasted, and they took and ate that thing. I'm saying, well, let me show you. 105, Psalm 105, 37. I'm pretty sure it is. Somebody look that up and check me. It says this. He's recounting that day. And it says this. God delivered his children out of Egypt, right? And it says this, He delivered them out with silver and gold. They had silver and gold piled on them. And not one sick. Not one weak. Not one feeble. Some translations say not one stumbled. Now come on, this is 400 years. That's 10 generations they've been slaves. Overworked, malnutritioned, no health care, beaten, beat down, depressed. And scholars would say there are 2 to 5 million of them. 2 to 5 million slaves in this shape, been slaves for 10 generations, beat down, overworked, malnutritioned, and 2 to 5 million of them marched out of Egypt, and not one of them crippled, not one of them weak, not one of them sick. Now, how in the world did that happen? I'd like to know. I'm believing that it happened because they ate the body of the lamb. somehow in the night. They took that thing in and ate that thing, and in the night, limbs are growing out, bones are cracking and healing, and miracles are happening all over. I don't know, you couldn't hear them. They're probably hollering, but because of the death angel deal, everybody was probably hollering. But I'm saying there was miracles going on in the house that night, and the next day, they marched out of there rich and healthy. They ate. Paul's saying, hey, because you're not understanding the bread, the body, the eating part of this deal, because you not understand what's actually taking place is the reason that you're not actually taking advantage of what's there for us to have, which is health and wholeness, healing, life, right? If they had that much power in an old covenant representation from a barnyard animal that's just a shadow and a picture of the real thing, how much more for those of us with the real thing ought to walk out of here with life and health and healing? Tell me it's not for today. Don't tell me they had more access to more under the old than we do in the new. Come on, I know I hear I say, well, let me remind you of this, because I know people say it all the time. We believe in communion. We have communion all the time. We've seen so many crazy miracles. I tell all the time, people still don't believe. And I say, you're telling me just from eating that tiny little thing that people can get healed? You're telling me from eating that little tiny styrofoam thing, whatever it is, you tell me by eating that, mixed with faith, that my body can be completely healed? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Let me remind you how the curse entered the world in the first place. How sickness and disease entered the world in the first place. How? By the simple act of eating. Wouldn't it be just like God to reverse the curse in our lives and in our bodies and in our health by the simple act of eating? I'm just saying, if you got something going on in your body, I'd be doing it every day. Partaking, right? Understanding. Isaiah 53. Remember that one? 4 and 5. Yet it was our weakness he carried. Our weakness he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down, and we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, but a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. He was beaten. Why? So we could be whole. He was whipped. Why? So we could be healed. Psalm 103, 2 and 4. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget none of his benefits. What's Paul saying? Hey, you're forgetting the benefits. You're not taking advantage of all the benefits. Forget none of his benefits, who pardons all your iniquities. Who pardons all your iniquities. So did he accomplish what he come to accomplish? Are all your iniquities pardoned? Okay, if they're all pardoned, how many are left? All means all, don't it? Listen what else it says. Who heals all your diseases? How many did he heal? How many's left after all? How many have not been healed? Who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with loving kindness and compassion. What does it actually mean to do this in remembrance and to actually take advantage of the benefits and all that he has available for us, right? What does that mean? Because it's the way that they took that was hindering them. It wasn't that they didn't take. It was the way that they took that was hindering them from receiving. Now I say, well, if we learn to take it right, then we'd be receiving. You with me? Jesus said this in John 3. His conversation with Nicodemus, right? He said, John 3:13, no one has risen into the heavenly realm except the Son of Man, who also exists in heaven. And just as Moses in the desert lifted up the brass replica of a snake on a pole for all the people to see and be healed, so the Son of Man is ready to be lifted up, so that those who truly believe in him will not perish but be given eternal life. Just as Moses lifted up the bronze serpent on the pole, in the same way when the Son of Man is lifted up. Now what does all that mean, right? So what they believed at the time was something about being lifted up on a pole, right? You guys remember the story? They're in the wilderness and they're grumbling and they're complaining, and here comes a bunch of poisonous snakes, and the poisonous snakes are biting them, and they're dying like flies. They're dropping everywhere, and they're like panicking. What are we going to do? Moses, go get God. God says, all right, Moses, here's what we're going to do. I want you to form a bronze serpent, and I want you to raise it up on a pole, and anybody who looks at it, when they see it on the pole, they be healed. So here's why that is, because they believed that anything that was hung up on a pole was cursed by God. So when they saw the thing that was killing them had been cursed by God, they just automatically got healed. You got it? Jesus is saying, just as, in the same way, when the Son of Man is lifted up, those that believe in that or see that, why is that? Because of what we read. All of our sicknesses, all of our diseases, all of our infirmities were placed on Him. And Jesus wasn't cursed, but all of the stuff that Jesus took upon His own body was cursed by God. It was cursed in the flesh. And when you look on the pole and you see that your sickness and disease has already been cursed by God, this is why I believe Jesus is saying, when you do this in remembrance. What's He saying? Look at the pole. In your mind, you can remember what happened when the Son of Man was lifted up. All of sickness, disease, and infirmities, every bit of it was put on the pole, and it's been cursed by God, and it's supposed to never plague you again. So you can go to that place now. In your mind, you can remember, and you can look at the pole and see that that thing that's been biting you has been cursed by God. But here's what I want you to do. I want everybody to have your imagination. You can close your eyes if you want to. Just sit there and close your eyes. Here's what I want you to do in your imagination. I don't know what you got going on, but in your mind you can remember and know. We read it, right? Isaiah described it. Peter described it. We've read all about it. We've seen the movies, right? The movies don't even come close to what it was, but I just want you to sit there with your eyes closed and remember. See sickness and disease on the cross. Cursed by God. Diabetes, put on the pole. Cancer, put on the pole. Come on, you see it? Hey, tick disease, put on the pole. What else? Arthritis, put on the pole. Come on, look at it. Do you see it? Jesus said, go in remembrance. You have a thought about this. Here's the deal. When you see it there in your memory, your body doesn't even recognize whether it's an imagined event. So what happens is your mind is now dumping the right medicine, the right chemicals, the adrenaline or whatever else. Your body's thinking that what you're imagining is actually happening now in the present, and your physical body is responding right now to what you see in your mind. What else we need to see on the pole? Trauma. You know what was on the pole? They twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his mind. Put it on his head. You know why? Because man's way of thinking has been twisted. And that twisted way of thinking, it's on the pole. You see it? My brain's part of my physical body. It needs rewired. I know there's processes and steps and ways to do all that, but I just like to look at it and see that it's been cursed by God, and I wake up tomorrow different. Every sickness, every disease was put on him, cursed in the flesh. Because he was whipped, because he was beaten, we are healed and made whole. Come on, you got it? Can you see it? You can practice this at home. Go do it. You don't have to be doing it here in a crowd or whatever. Take this stuff home and do it. Spend time. Go into that place and remember. Let him show you. And when you see it on the pole, I promise you, you'll be healed.
Please follow and share this message. And for more information, visit srcowboychurch.com.